Hey everyone, welcome to All Parts Leo Quan, who's a badass. I'm your host, Gary Lopez, and today we are stoked to have, for our third episode of Who's a Badass, David Ellefson. For those who don't know David, he's an original bass player for the band Megadeth. David's impact in the world of metal is undeniable and significant. Really happy to have him here today. Hey David, thanks for joining us today, man. How are you doing?
Man, I'm great. I'm great. I'm just moving through it. It's there's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, Metal Church ramping up now for our summer tours in America. So
That's great.
through the 90s, I started using pretty much exclusively five-string basses. And but now most everything I'm doing, Kings of Thrash and Metal Church, is all four-string stuff. I like five-string. I love the tone of it because there's so much more mass coming in from the neck joint, into the
Right.
body. There's a lot more resonance. But man, it's a killer
On the back.
on my little body, man.
Once you get up past 10 pounds, it's heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it isn't heavy, it doesn't sound good.
Right. Right.
That goes for speakers, cabinets. The SVT head has the
Right.
transformers, the heaviest part of it. Everything in the bass world needs to be heavy in order to sound heavy. It
Right. I
seems
mean,
like.
part of our the badass bridge whole concept of that was right, it's a little more mass,
Dude.
better string transference to go to the body. So,
Speaking of which, I was
yeah,
writing down some notes because I realized here at the house I don't currently have a bass here that has my badass bridges on it, but I,
yeah,
I have I have a bunch down in storage and stuff. So I was thinking about when I first started using badass bridges, and the very first one was from Ed Roman, the famous guitar man. I would talk his ear off for hours, sitting in my dad's office on the farm and just talking. He'd fill me in about BC Rich and Highwatt, and I remember in Ed's East Coast Sound, he'd send me his catalogs. He'd have all these different vendor catalogs, and I had these catalogs from Schecter guitars, which was they were just a parts company. I
right,
don't even think they built real guitars. I think it was just you could buy necks, pick guards, and everything was a Fender replica, maybe a Les Paul, but I think for the
right,
most part it was all kind of Fender replacement parts,
right,
like mirrored pick guards. I was like, wow, that's freaking cool. And then
right,
I see Phil Lynott on the cover of Live and Dangerous Thin Lizzy, and he's got a mirrored pick guard. I'm like, so when I
right.
did my PV signature bass during the 2000s, I kind of went after the Phil Lynott look. So Ed, I bought a PA from him finally, and then I also bought a BC Rich Longhorn bass guitar, and that had the DiMarzio pickups, and it had a badass bridge on it.
Right.
And this was at a time when BC Rich, they were a little small custom, like just a little boutique company out in El Monte, California. They were, which I would then later go to because then fast forward a few years, our drummer in Megadeth, Gar Samuelson, was a general manager of BC Rich. So I
Ah,
got to actually meet Bernie Rico, the
oh,
owner,
very cool.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
the BC Rich, Bernie
Right.
Rico. And to have a badass bridge was like you've arrived,
Right.
that bass had everything cool. Like if you buy a hot rod car and Mercedes, you put an AMG, or back in the day, you'd have an Alpine stereo,
Right.
something in
Right.
the 80s.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, that bass had it just checked all the boxes of cool. And then as I got out to LA in 83, a few years later, we started Megadeth. In 84, Gar Samuelson came into the band, and that's when he worked at BC Rich. And then that's when we started to get all kinds of really cool guitars that we could sometimes keep for sure,
Right.
loaners for video shoots. That's why, like in the P Cells video, I had that fighter jet bass, which now sits at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in
Right.
Cleveland. That has a badass bridge on it, I believe. Pretty
Very
much
cool.
all the BC Rich stuff through then, they were ramped. A lot of people were starting to use them, Motley Crue, Lita Ford, Tony Iommi. They were Rick Derringer.
Right.
So they were really starting to, get into the MTV hard rock metal game big time, which made the supply easier and better. And that's why, like in the Wake Up Dead video, I'm playing an Ironbird
Right.
bass with
Right.
that. I remember for sure that had a badass bridge on it. Fast forward a bunch of years, out to we moved here to Arizona. We're making the Megadeth Euthanasia album. I go to a little guitar store in town called the Scottsdale Guitar Shop, and I buy a 78 rosewood neck Fender P bass, which had, ironically, I still have that. I record with that a lot. I recorded the New Metal Church record with it, actually,
Very
Dead to
cool.
Rights. That has a DiMarzio pickup and a badass bridge on it.
Awesome.
And it's freaking killer, man. And then, and then fast forward into 2011, Megadeth were doing the 20th anniversary Rust in Peace album. So I came back into the Jackson Guitars fold. So we started to build basically the new. We did a limited edition Rust in Peace bass. It was custom shop. They're quite expensive, $4,000 or $5,000 for these 4 and 5 strings. But because of it, they didn't have an OEM a bridge. They are
Right.
OEM meaning something they manufactured, right?
Right.
So they had to go off campus, and we came to Badass, to get Leo Quan's bridge.
Right.
And Leo, I don't know, you can fill me in on some of the history of it, but I remember they were not easy to get, a lot of them, and we needed a lot of them. We did 100 4 and 5 strings, so we needed that many to just sort of push out this initial run.
You did a good point. I think there was quite a bit of time where there was no badass. They had, Leo had
Yeah.
passed away. The company had dissolved. So we got the patents a number of years ago to bring it back to life, so to speak. So I was curious on because your sound is so distinct, right? I mean, it's fantastic.
Thank you.
How do you so if it's a flat that you're going for, how do you color it in the studio to get through beyond the guitars? Is there something
I
compression or EQ that you do specifically every time that that's your signature, or is it depend on the
You
material?
it's weird. I think in the era that I grew up, I mean, I started listening to records in the mid 70s, and I didn't know anything other than what I saw. I listened with my ears or with my
Right,
eyes,
right.
I'd see a lot of Fender P basses. Tom Hamilton had P basses, Music Man's SVTs, Gene Simmons had SVTs. And so my tone is, I like Tom Hamilton's tone. He
Hmm.
played with fingers and pick. That was kind of, I should really give him more props to what an influence he was to me. Obviously, Sweet Emotion. And, I liked clean players. Then I started hearing Stanley Clark School Days. And of course, he played the Alembic. I remember seeing him on Midnight Special one night as
Right.
a kid,
Wow. Great show. Yeah.
growing up. Oh, man. And they had all the great players.
Right.
And he was on there. His tone was super clean. So I'm out there, working in my shed. It was my tool shop, where I would build lighting systems, and I would learn how to run the PA. And
Hmm.
so I would plug my bass into the PA system and go, man, that sounds amazing. It was so clean. But then what I realized, once the band gets in the room, that bass sound it vanishes. It just becomes
Right.
transparent. So then I started to understand why guys were using, say, Ampegs. They would use a bank of the 10-inch speakers in an
Right.
SVT
The eight
cabinet.
tens.
Yeah, because it doesn't have a ton of bottom, it doesn't have a ton of top, but it just carves through the mid range. But then I learned, that mid range also tends to compete sometimes with where a Marshall lives,
Right.
especially in the 80s. Marshalls, started to finally have the,
Jason
guys were,
800s.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
learning how to get more high gain out of it, which we liked in my era.
Right.
For guitars, we loved high gain. For me, for bass, I liked super clean. So I figured, look, if guitars are high gain, someone here's got to be clean to just hold it, to
Right.
sort of be able to hear. So that's how my bass, I just naturally gravitated toward it,
Hmm.
and I would go back and forth between fingers and pick. I found in Megadeth the pick worked best because I also, learned, I wrote as well some guitar parts for the band. So I learned that it was just easier as the bass player to easier, not meaning it was lazy. It was easier to cop the parts and play the lines better using a plectrum rather than my fingers. And it also provided this very clean sound. And as I started making more records in the studio, producers and engineers love the pick. They
Right.
love the plectrum.
Awesome.
Um,
So you listened
yeah.
to Aerosmith was one of your early.
Mhm.
How did you get into the jazz stuff? Was it strictly Midnight Special? You just saw that for the first time and said, okay.
So look, when I was 12 years old, growing up on the farm, I'd been playing bass for maybe a year. There was a guy in town because I lived 6 miles out of town, literally on a farm, and then in town where I went to school, and the town village, right? There's this guy. He quit. He was the only like bass player in town, right? The only bass player. So he played in
Hmm.
jazz band. He played with some other buddies of mine who were much older than me, like 16 years old, right? So these guys had bands. So this guy's name is Bob. He quit all of that and kind of I think put the bass down. So I got the call for jazz band. So I'm like 12 years old now playing in
Very
junior
cool.
high jazz band, and
Yeah.
I played tenor sax in the orchestra band. And my band leader, he was a jazz drummer. So one day he says to me, he goes, "Look, David, I know you're not into the sax. I get it. You're a great bass player. I need you to play bass in jazz band. So here's the deal: practice enough on the saxophone to get a passing grade. I'll make sure you pass. If you're showing the effort,
Right.
I'll pass you.
Awesome.
So that because you got to be an orchestra band in order to do the elective, which is jazz band. So I said, copy that, yes, sir. So I
Right.
practiced just enough, to make that work. So I played in jazz band all the way up through high school, which then introduced me to Al Di Meola and Spyro Gyra
Right.
and
So you
Weather
have to do some
Report.
reading, right? Jazz band.
Oh
You must
yeah, oh,
have.
no,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I read my first musical experience was my mom and dad had a Wurlitzer organ. So because my mom played piano, she sang. She was kind of a
Uh,
music gifted one in our family.
right.
So right away at like age 8 or so, I started taking organ lessons from like the neighbor lady who was also the church organist. So I learned all these songs that you don't like and you don't really like playing, but you do it. But I learned how to read treble and bass clef. So I had some reading abilities, and I understood on paper the language of music.
You have you were able to see the relationship between the bass and a chord, and how simply changing a single bass note can make that chord minor now, not major, and how much impact it
I got
has,
to.
right?
And I think it's always good to take lessons. I think it's good to not just be a guitar player, but learn the language of music because a guitar plays music.
Right.
A piano player plays music. Learn the language, and
Great advice. Yeah.
if you're going to be it's like when you go to a foreign country and you're there long enough, you start to pick up some of the dialogue. And speaking that is not the same as going to school to learn the language,
Sure.
nouns, verbs, pronouns, adjectives, So I think when you take lessons and you get musically educated, you not only understand your instrument, but you understand the language of the community you're in, because you're in a community. If I'm a bass player, I'm playing with guitar players, piano players, drummers. In jazz band, I played with horn players. I played in church bands where you have vocalists. You start to understand you're part of a community, and
Right.
how
The
do I
relationship between the other instruments as
yeah.
well. Yeah.
Play
Yeah.
nice with the community, number one. Make your role matter.
Right.
Understand your role. If I'm playing in Kings of Thrash or Metal Church, it's, we're freaking hammered down, turn it up, let's go.
Right.
If you're playing in a church band or a country band or you're playing in a jazz band or something, understand the relationship of what it is you're doing in context to the other musicians
Yeah.
in the room.
That's great advice. I think that's something consistent. Interesting as I'm interviewing some of you iconic players such as Rudy Sarzo and Freddie Washington last week, and now you. That's a
Oh, Freddie,
that's
Man, Freddie's
right.
amazing.
Yeah, well, that's I was going to say there's a common thread, so far that I've seen, between you three, as far as putting the work in, I guess, early. Now, how much practicing do you do when you first started playing, and did that continue or?
Well, the organ was not a labor of love, so I
Right.
did it sort of as the requirement to, every Tuesday or whatever, make
Sure.
sure, I could
What
get
about
a
the
passing
bass?
grade from the teacher, right? So,
Right.
um, probably the best part about that organ is it also had this brand new device called the cassette player. Because yeah, this is probably the early 70s,
Right?
72
Wow.
or something, right? So my mom had, the Statler Brothers and Charlie Pride and, these country and Western
Hmm.
stars. But there was another cassette they had called Jesus Christ Superstar, which was
Love it.
friggin' awesome. It
Right.
sounded very different than the Lutheran church, like in a cool rock and roll kind of way, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then we'd later learn it's, Ian Gillan and,
Right.
like
Incredible.
real rock stars,
Right.
So no wonder I liked it, right? So I
Right.
liked that. I started trending toward that. And then I got a Kiss Destroyer cassette in 1976 when that came out. And then my mom bought me Queen, Night at the Opera. And,
Wow.
so my brother got Heart, Dreamboat Annie. So suddenly, I'm in it now. I'm finally in
Right.
it by the mid 70s and finding my own music,
Right. Right.
and not my mom's music, but my music. So that organ, aside from the organ, the cassette player was probably my favorite part of it, was to sit and just
Yeah,
listen to
exposed to new
stuff.
stuff. Same thing. I went to see Kiss. My brother took me to my first rock concert, and it was Kiss at the old Boston Garden. Just blew me away. Changed my
Of
life.
course.
I mean, I just
It,
like I was playing piano at the time. And I'm like, okay, I'm all
mhm.
set with that. I'm going to play
Yeah.
that guitar now.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah. How do I breathe fire and make smoke come out of a guitar?
Yeah,
That
I
was a
could.
lot more fun.
Yeah, I could feel the flames coming up, and just looking around this, the
Right.
concert arena, and just saying, "Man, this is incredible, man. This is awesome."
Well,
So,
I always say they were my Beatles, and probably you too. For our
right,
generation,
yeah,
they were what the Beatles did to the previous generation, as far as really turning the world on its ear, as far as just this cool group that just changed the course of the Earth
yeah,
trajectory.
and
That's
and it was.
what that's
It
what Kiss
was
did for our generation.
Yeah, and it was a tangible thing. You could see him. You thought, okay, I can do that. I think I can do
Right,
that. It wasn't Return to Forever or something else where you go, okay, yeah, this is incredible, but
right.
that was something that was obtainable. At least it felt like the
And,
Beatles, right?
and to your question about practicing, I think that's just it, right? So the organ is that, saxophone, kind of the same thing. Put in my 30 minutes. It was sort of a requirement, algebra, whatever,
Yep.
math, reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever, and then practice the saxophone. But it was sort of an obligation. It was a requirement. Once I got the bass guitar in my hands, that was my labor of love. And I didn't know how to play it. I didn't know you only played one note at a time. I thought, because I realized guitars. I had a little. My mom and dad bought me a little nylon string guitar. I woke up one day and it's laying on the chair in my room. I'm going, what is that? I didn't ask for that. I didn't want a bass. You know what I mean? I'm all indignant. And in fact, it's funny because I remember my brother liked the Bay City Rollers, and I remember
Ah,
seeing
right.
pictures of them, and they had like right behind you that Gibson. What is that? A studio? I don't know what that bass is.
It's a recording bass they called it.
Oh,
Yeah, I
the
think
recording.
at one point they called it a Triumph bass. I think at one point, but I
Okay.
think that's a recording. Yeah, yeah.
So I remember the Bay City Rollers bass player had something similar to that.
Mhm.
So I just paid attention to the bass. On Saturday night, my family would sit around the TV. We'd watch Hee Haw. And then, and so I'd always just watch the musicians, a lot of
Right,
Fenders, Telecasters, which,
Roy
to me,
Clark.
the Telecaster to this day still represents country and Western music.
Yeah, yeah, it still does. Absolutely, it
It
really
it
does.
it, it
Yeah,
does,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
funny because I see a lot of guys. I was watching a clip of Alex Lifeson last night with Rick Beato, and he's talking about how a lot of what he writes and records is on a Telecaster.
Right,
Jimmy Page, the Telecaster. So and of course Slipknot, John Five. These guys have made the telly like cool and rock and roll. But to me, it's always kind of it's stamped in my mind that it's kind of the Buck Owens, country and Western guitar.
right, right,
Whereas the
right.
Strat screamed rock and roll. So I
Yeah,
always,
Hendrix and
yeah. So I got
yeah.
myself a little Hondo 2 Stratocaster copy. I kind of did the Dave Murray thing. I carved out the back. You pick up long before I'd seen Iron Maiden.
Yep.
I carved out, put a super distortion DiMarzio in it. It had a fucking tremolo arm and all that stuff. So I just watched what my heroes were doing,
Yeah,
and back in those days, kind of like that's why when Eddie Van Halen came on the scene, I was like, I love this guy. He goes in the garage and he rips his guitars apart because
right.
that's what I was doing. I'd call guys like Ed Roman and I'd say, hey, can I get a this? Can I get a that? I'd have to drive over to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, an hour and a half away to buy my Roto Sound swing bass strings because that's what Gene Simmons and Chris Squire and all my heroes used. So I'd have to drive over there to buy my strings, which were expensive, $20 as a kid. But
Right,
I on the
right.
farm I was kind of like Eddie. as I read these memoirs now and these things about Eddie, and you walk into 5150, and the place is just a mess with freaking guitars ripped apart,
Right,
shit everywhere.
right,
The what it was, there was the saying, that the mother of invention, necessity is the mother of
right.
invention. So I just sort of went after tone I liked, and my PA system when I moved out to Hollywood in 1983, that PA system basically was largely my bass rig for Megadeth in the first few years.
Mm.
I kept my Ashley preamp, my AB systems, power amps I bought from Ed Roman. I had my JBL 4560 cabinets. I actually made some. There's a 4560, which I think was the horn, and then I made some 4530s in shop class, which were the scoops. Weren't
Yep.
those the one with
Oh
a
yeah.
single 15 with the scoop?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Because that's what I saw. My heroes, the PA guy, the bands that were touring the circuit, the ballrooms in Minnesota. That's what they had. So I literally went and built. I had one, so I built three more in shop class. So
Wow.
this is how I, again, mother, necessity, the mother of invention. So I
Right.
just
Right.
start fucking building shit on the farm if I needed it.
So after you moved to LA, right, and
Yeah.
started to how much time had involved when you had left Midwest and then actually your success started?
My friend Greg, we moved into an apartment, 1736 North Sycamore. It's still there, just off Hollywood Boulevard, one block east of La Brea. It's still there. I drive by it all the time when I go there. In
Oh,
fact, I
very
take
cool.
friends that go there. We'll go see a show at the Whiskey. I go, I got to show you something, and I'll
Right
show
on.
the haunts, where that was where we formed Megadeth, was
Wow.
there in that apartment building. It's where we started. Dave lived upstairs. He had just gotten out of Metallica about 6 weeks earlier. Me and Greg land in Hollywood, and we meet Dave, and basically the three of us we start Megadeth. There was a
Wow.
singer guy that Dave had been kind of hanging around named Laura Kane, but he kind of faded out of the thing pretty quickly. And then Dijon Crothers was our drummer, who we got. I think he answered an ad out of the Recycler or something, which is the classified ads. But yeah, I mean, literally, I was there a week, and we meet Dave, and within a month, we're playing together. We start talking about a new band, and my friend Greg says, dude, let's call the band Megadeth. And now we've got a mission, we've got a template, and there it was.
Wow. I mean, 10 Grammy nominations, one win as well,
One.
author, multiple bands, composer. Pretty good career so far, I gotta say.
It's been good. I mean, it still beats working, I'll
Right,
say that
right.
much. I never could figure out what I would do as a career, a backup. So I just do this. This is,
Wow.
and it goes back to your question about practicing. You practice because you want to. Like I sit here, I'm, keeping Metal Church songs now fresh under my fingers. I'll pick up a guitar and suddenly I start writing something. And even if it doesn't have a home yet, I just catalog it because it's just always good to have ideas floating around. Suddenly a lyric idea hits me. And the next thing you know, I'm now in a creative path writing
It's great.
something. And that's how those Ellefson Soto records developed with Jeff Scott Soto. Is I would just start writing. I'd get together with Andy Martingelli over in Europe. We'd get into a studio up in Wembley. Next thing you know, we've got 7, 8, 9, 10 songs lined out. We call Jeff, dude, let's do a record. Bang, done. So I think it's just so long as you stay in the creative wheel. And I learned that from Gar Samuelson's brother, Stuart, who was also a
Hmm.
fantastic player, because they had a band that was kind of like Return to Forever. It's called the New Yorkers,
Uh,
before Gar got into Megadeth. A very progressive fusion thing with Chris Poland in the
hmm.
band as well. And Stuart said that. He goes, I think the deal with create, because I was asking him about writing, and he goes, I think the idea is just always to kind of get the channel open and just always be creating.
Right.
And I remember he told me that when I was about 19 years old, and I thought that's a good way to look at it. Just get the creative door open and keep it open.
So I know you got a lot coming up. You have a new tour, I believe, with Metal Church. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah, we launched the band. New album Dead to Rights came out April 10th, and then we launched the group or sort of relaunched, I should say, at a festival down in Mexico back in May. So coming up here in July, now we've got some U.S. Canada dates along the East Coast. Then we're over to Europe for festivals and other shows there with Testament, Black Label Society, Armored Saints, a bunch of cool stuff. Yeah, then
Great.
then right after that, I actually go to Norway, UK, and Ireland, Northern Ireland with Kings of Thrash. We've got our last shows we're going to do for the year, kind of wrapping up that world tour that we've been on with that as well. So that's been a lot of fun and very cool. So, and then after
Great.
that, then it's pretty much Metal Church, in through the rest of the year,
Great.
into next
Great.
year. Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
look forward to seeing you. I'm going to be at the first show on your tour, July 17th in Derry, New
Okay,
Hampshire. So,
great.
and people get tickets on your website as well, or
Yeah, everything's on, I guess it's
okay,
metalchurchofficial.com.
great,
There's all the tour stuff there, so you can go there, look, obviously bands in town, all the links, So
great, awesome,
yeah,
awesome,
get the tickets, get your VIPs. We do have some stage use bases that I'm rolling out, some of my Jackson signature models. So it's all there. So yeah,
awesome. All right,
go
great.
check it out. Yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody show. I'm super excited. I love Metal Church. I've been such a fan of the band from day one, and we've performed together when I was in Megadeth, Metal Church, Megadeth stuff. So I'm really thrilled to be
Great.
part of the band and doing it now.
Awesome. Can't wait to see it. So I
Yeah,
can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk with us today, David. And I wish you the best going forward. And I'll see you next month.
awesome, Gary. Thanks much, buddy. See
Thank
you.
you. Bye now.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today for episode 3 of Who's a Badass. I want to thank David Ellefson as well for joining us. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below. And thanks again. Stay tuned.